Author Donna Jodhan presents Episode 3, Santa's Secret Toy Shop. This is a story of a little boy called Timmy Faygan and his desire to do something for others before he departed this world. Timmy was given but just a few months to live by his doctors, and he was determined to do something to try and make the world a better place before he died. Read about Timmy's way of having wanted to do this, how he went about it, and what happened on Christmas morning. Santa's Secret Toy Shop. A fictional story of a child's dream come true. Written by Donna J. Jodhan.
Hello there, it's Detective DJ, and a very, very Merry Christmas and a Happy Holiday Season to everyone. I'm delighted to be back with you for yet another episode in my Christmas special series, something that I have dubbed the 12 Days of Christmas. And this is the third episode in my series. This one is called Santa's Secret Toy Shop. No doubt you've heard the first two episodes, Santa's Super Secret, and the second episode being the President's Super Christmas Plane. Now it is time to move on to Santa's Secret Toy Shop. And I honestly hope that you guys have enjoyed the first two episodes as much as I have enjoyed bringing it to you. And now it's time to go on another adventure. I hope that everyone is enjoying the holiday season, and I hope that everyone is busy doing their shopping and doing what they need to do, decorate the tree, get all the gifts, bake all the goodies. Now it's time to sit back and enjoy Santa's Secret Toy Shop. 1. The Bundle on the Doorstep. It's just one more week to Christmas, and the house was gaily decorated, and the scent of pine permeated. Presents abounded everywhere, and it was almost time to get ready, because the big night was oh so near. The tall, stately man started into his checklist for one more time. He checked his special suit, he checked his gadgets, and he checked all of the packages in his huge, oversized living room. He checked his computers and his electronic devices. Then he went to his kitchen to check on dinner. Wow! His faithful housekeeper had cooked his favorite meal and had left it in the oven for him. A roasted Cornish hen, baby potatoes, and Brussels sprouts, with a huge slice of apple pie to finish things off. The tall, stately man moved leisurely to his fridge and removed a bottle of his favorite wine. Then, with the utmost of care, he opened the wine and poured himself a half glass. Then he placed it on the kitchen table, close to the window. Next, he moved to the oven and removed his dinner, savoring the delicious aroma as he took it to the table. This tall, stately man made the sign of the cross before sitting down and did not forget to light the customary candle. And soon he was digging into his dinner. He ate slowly, and a satisfied smile spread across his face as he did so. This was his favorite time of the day, when all was quiet and he could think, and when he could savor his meal in peace, with no phones or emails to interrupt him, and no administrative assistants to give him a hard time. Friends of the tall, stately man would have agreed that he had had everything that he had ever wanted. But he in turn would have disagreed. True it is he was filthy rich. True it is that he did not want for anything. But true it is he was a very lonely man. He had migrated to this city, this very large city, so many years ago, from an Eastern European land, and had done so after his entire family had been lost in a war, leaving him as the only survivor. He had been determined to make a man of himself, and he was just 19 when he had come here. But he had worked very hard to get where he was today. And he had done it without the support of a family. He had altered his name shortly after arriving in his new homeland, and he did not share much of his past with those around him. He had many friends, but very few close ones. And each Christmas he had spent the holiday season giving back. Each Christmas Eve he would load up his huge van with mounds of toys, and with the help of his office staff, he would distribute them to the less fortunate. Upon completion of his dinner and wine, the tall, stately man had stretched contentedly and had rubbed his stubbly chin. And just as he was making to rise, the doorbell had rung. Funny, but he had not been expecting anyone. He rose, and after placing his huge feet into comfy furry slippers, he walked swiftly to the door and opened it. At first he saw no one, and was just getting ready to close his door against the cold. The Christmas wind was very cold. Then he heard a sound. He looked up and down the street, but saw nothing. He had begun to think that it was just the winter wind, when he again heard a sound, but this time it was a bit louder. Then he saw it. It was snuggled in the far corner of the top step. It was partially covered with fluffy white snow, but it was there. The tall, stately man moved quickly towards the object of his interest, and soon he was bending over a large basket, and there was something inside that was crying. The tall, stately man hesitated for a second as he looked down at the basket. It was not too large, and there was a white envelope with the words "Merry Christmas" printed across it in bold gold letters. The white envelope was securely fastened to the basket, and it could not be missed. What could it be? A Christmas kitten? A Christmas puppy? Better find out before he caught a cold. The tall, stately man picked up the basket and cradled it to his chest as he retreated indoors. He locked his door and took the basket to a coffee table. And the coffee table stood in the middle of his very crowded living room. He placed the basket gently on the table. Then excitement and curiosity took over, and soon his fingers were racing to unwrap the contents of the basket. The tall, stately man was not prepared for what happened next. Under the blue knitted blanket covering, which was the interior of the basket, lay a baby with the face of an angel. The baby had bright blue eyes and fine golden hair, and smiled up at the tall, stately man as their eyes met. It was a little boy. He was dressed in a tiny Christmas suit, and tucked in beside him was a chubby little Christmas bear. What was this all about? What could it mean? What a surprise! The baby stuck his tiny fingers into his tiny mouth and stared up at the tall, stately man. And in turn, the tall, stately man could not help but gawk open-mouthed. Then he fixed his attention on the white envelope, and he reached for it. The reading of the letter. The tall, stately man quickly slid open the white envelope and removed a sheet of paper. The handwriting on the paper was very neat and precise, and the words were unmistakable. The letter read as follows: Dear Eric, you do not know me, but I know who you are. And I know that you will take good care of our baby son. I know that from reading about you, our little son will have a good home and will have the best chance to live a good life. My wife and I could no longer afford to look after him. We are very young, struggling to find jobs, and we are so very far from home. We have no family to help out, and we are afraid to ask for help. We are not even sure where our next home is going to be, as we are constantly on the move, looking for work. Our baby may need some medical attention, but I am not sure. He has been sick on and off, and at times very sick. He has been better for a bit now, but who knows for how long. Please look after him for us, and give him the life that we could never give to him. His name is Timmy, and he likes lots of milk. We have left 2 bottles for him in his basket. Please forgive us for abandoning our son like this, but we believe that it is best for him, and that you are the best for him. We are really not bad parents. We love him so much and want what's best for him. The letter was signed Mickey and Jan. The tall, stately man could not believe what he had just read. outside the Christmas winds to blow strong and hard, while in the huge oversized living room the logs burnt, the scent of pine wafted all around, and silence prevailed. What to do? Then the silence was interrupted by the baby starting to cry. The tall, stately man knew that he had to do something, and it did not take long for him to make up his mind. A bright smile soon spread across his face. As he set about his task, he thought, and then he ran into action. One thing was for sure, little Timmy was going to spend Christmas with him. Starting out. Eric Verkowski had left his home in Eastern Europe so many years ago, and had come here to make a new life after having lost his entire family in the war. Or at least this is what he had thought. He had looked far and wide for them before giving up and then finding a way out of his war-torn home. Eric knew that the only one who could help him was he himself. And his parents had also known this. Their oldest son had never let them down, and they had always known that come what may, he would survive. How proud they would be of him today. The memory of losing his parents and his siblings would be forever engraved in his mind. One minute they were eating dinner in their meager little home on a Sunday evening, and the next minute there was a sharp knock at the door, followed by the breaking down of the door. 3 big, burly men had broken in and had proceeded to drag Eric's parents towards the door, while his 2 younger siblings had begun to scream. And the last thing that Eric's dad had shouted to his kids before being dragged away was, "Look after each other." In the haze of the moment, Eric had remembered that his younger brothers had started running for the door to try and stop the men from taking their parents. Eric had remembered running after them, but soon he had lost sight of them. He had spent the next few hours looking for both parents and brothers, but without any success. He had spent the next few days searching far and wide, eating very little and dodging anyone and everyone, anyone who looked like a member of the army. About a month after he had lost both parents and brothers, Eric had started to give up hope, and then, one night as he lay on some fresh hay in a farmer's barn, he had made up his mind. He would flee his homeland and try to make a new life for himself and in a new country. That night Eric had cried himself to sleep and had asked God to forgive him for deserting his parents, his brothers, and his homeland. Then the next day he had set out to put his plan into action. It took him a few months to reach his intended new homeland, and Lady Luck, along with some good Samaritans along the way, had helped him to reach safely. And on a cool spring day, on his 19th birthday, he had reached America. Eric had never married and had no known kids of his own. But secretly, he had always hoped to somehow have a son. As a newly migrated young man, he had worked hard, and whatever he did, he had saved wisely and had used his money to go to night school. Along the way, he had changed his name from Eric Verkowski to Eric Faygan or Eric Faygan, and no one had ever really noticed. Eric had been a very shy young man, keeping to himself much of the time and using every opportunity to learn as much as he could. He read avidly, watched a lot of TV, and never tired of hanging out at coffee shops and cafeterias, keeping enough of a safe distance from the crowds, but at the same time staying close enough to keep up. He had made up his mind to save his money and open up his own business, and this is exactly what he had managed to do. Then luck and savvy had done the rest for him. And now, at the age of 45, Eric was a self-made millionaire, a food chain mogul who was probably one of the most charitable in his area. Each Christmas he made very sure to give back to his community. Eric Faygan now lived in a very nice but modest home. He had hired a housekeeper and a chauffeur to live on the premises with him, and they were an older married couple. Pavel and Marina Marlikov looked upon Eric as their son, and would have done anything for him and to protect him. They were absolutely delighted when Eric had called them that fateful evening, excitement ringing in his voice, and he had asked them to come quickly. Pavel and Marina could not believe their eyes when they had entered and had seen Eric clumsily cradling baby Timmy in his arms. And then the rest, as they would say, is history. Marina gently and expertly took the baby from Eric, and with both men looking on, she proceeded to take care of things. She had fed and put the baby to bed, and then she had come in to talk to her employer and her husband. They were both waiting for her in the living room. That Christmas heralded a new era for Eric, Pavel, and Marina. Eric had kept to his Christmas tradition of giving to the less fortunate, but now he had something new to look after. A new and unexpected son, and a new addition to the family. The Faygan family. Eric was normally a very private man, and he had always kept his life a very quiet and low-key one. But it seemed that after having made little Timmy his own, he had decided to come out of the shadows, so to speak. Soon after Timmy had been formally brought into the family, Eric had made it known to the world, and soon enough photos of Eric, Timmy, and Pavel and Marina had become a regular fixture across the pages of local newspapers and even some international publications. There were many who had enjoyed reading about the Faygan family, but for a secret few, reading about the Faygans was even more satisfactory. And once or twice there was even a short biography of Eric Faygan, the multimillionaire. publicity that Eric had previously shied away from in the past. That was until little Timmy had arrived. Eric had become a changed man, and Pavel and Marina had watched with great satisfaction. Little Timmy had fitted in so nicely into his newfound family, and the public had grown accustomed to seeing his photo regularly splashed across his pages. A darling little boy with an angelic face, a sweet smile, and those big blue eyes staring back at the reader. Photos of Timmy and his family at the beach. Timmy and his dad strolling through malls. Timmy with Pavel and Marina at the park. Timmy and his family on ski trips. The very special child. At a very early age, Eric had realized that Timmy was a very special child. He was walking and running at 8 months, speaking full sentences just before he turned 1 year, and was drawing, spelling, and playing the piano by the time he was 2 years old. By age 3, he was well ahead with his math, and by age 4, he was using an iPad with no difficulty. And by age 5, child psychologists had told Eric that Timmy was at high school level. Wow! Eric was advised to let Timmy fulfill his potential, and Eric had brought in special tutors for the budding child genius. Eric was simply in awe of his son's abilities, and at times Timmy even seemed to surpass his dad. Timmy loved everything around him. He loved to learn and he loved to laugh. And Eric made very sure to teach him humility, and the little boy never forgot. When Timmy was not learning, he was accompanying his dad on trips. And whenever they were at home, he spent a lot of time with Pavel and Marina. One of Timmy's favorite activities was at Christmas time, when he and Eric would go out to give presents to the less fortunate. Eric would dress up as Santa Claus, and Timmy would be his little helper, riding high on Eric's shoulders and handing out gifts to the little kids. One of the most memorable photos were those where Timmy would be holding out huge packages twice his size to kids who were also twice his size. These were the photos that usually made it to the pages of international magazines at Christmas time, and ones that were of particular interest to a few special persons. These were very special and happy times for Eric and Timmy, and even Pavel and Marina. But as they say, good things almost always never last forever. And this was about to happen for the Faygan family. Timmy is told. Eric had decided that Timmy's birthday would always be celebrated on December the 6th, as it had been estimated that he was probably just a few weeks old when he had been left on Eric's doorstep. Timmy was now 6, and within the last few months he had begun to suffer from terrible stomach pains. Eric had remembered that in the letter that had accompanied Timmy, his parents had said that they had thought that the little boy might have a medical problem. They were right. Eric, Marina, and Pavel had crowded into Eric's car, along with the sickly little boy, and on this bright summer's day they had drove to the doctor's office. The doctor was waiting for them, and after a brief examination had sent Timmy for tests and x-rays. The doctor's expression was grave, but he had refused to give any early prognosis, despite being pressed by Eric. A few days later, the doctor, who was a close friend of Eric's, came out to the house to deliver the news. Timmy was a very sick little boy, and if he did not get a liver transplant very soon, he would surely die. Eric, Pavel, and Marina were devastated, but none of them would show their emotions in front of Timmy. The doctor had pledged to Eric, his good friend, that he would do all in his power to save the little boy, because he was a precious little boy. Timmy knew that something was very wrong, and at first he had waited for his dad to tell him, and he did not have to wait very long. Eric had gathered Pavel and Marina together, and along with all of the courage that he could muster up. And the next day, little Timmy was told the whole truth. He was told the entire story from when he was left on the doorstep a few Christmases ago to what the doctors had told Eric and the bleak prognosis. To everyone's surprise, the little boy had handled the news more than just well. He did not cry. He did not flinch. He took it like a little man. And after he had been told, he had asked to be excused and had gone quietly to his room. There, Timmy had spent the next while praying and thinking. He first thanked God for all that he had had, and his parents for having brought him to Eric. He asked God to bless Eric, his dad, Pavel and Marina, and his real parents. Then he fell into a deep sleep, and as he slept, he dreamed. It did not take very long for word of mouth for Timmy's illness to get around. Within a matter of hours, the news was all across the wires. Then people were emailing and phoning Eric, and tweets on Twitter and posts on Facebook were making the rounds. A donor was being sought for the beloved little boy. A little boy with the face of an angel and a smile as bright as sunshine. Somewhere not too far and not too close, someone was reading all of this with great interest, while others had begun to wonder and ponder. Timmy's dream. Timmy had fallen into a very deep sleep after he had gone to his room, but not before he had prayed and thanked God for everything. He was wise beyond his years and extremely matured in his thinking. He had grasped the severity of his illness, and the man-child was ready for the next phase of his journey. Timmy did not dream at first, but when he did, he sure did. The little boy dreamed that he was seated at a huge work table, along with dozens of other little boys and girls, and they were all similar in age to him. They were all working on various toys, and all around him were stacks and stacks of all kinds of toys and games. And games of all sizes and shapes. Toys for girls and toys for boys. Toys for kids of all ages. And toys for adults too. There were lots of men and women dressed in Santa suits, walking between and among the work tables, chatting with the kids and helping out. But it was clear to Timmy that there was only one boss. He had a very long white beard, and everyone was calling him Santa. The door to this gigantic room was painted in bright red, and from where he was sitting, Timmy could read the large bright letters which said, Santa's Secret Toy Shop. No entry allowed. The room was filled with lots of activity and festivity. Pungent smells of baking goodies. Good cheer and lots of laughter. And every so often there would be a loud ho, ho, ho coming from Santa Claus. The ho, ho, ho was booming and echoed throughout the room. Everyone was busy doing something. Everyone was helping everyone else. And everyone seemed to know exactly what they needed to do. Even Timmy found himself working on an electronic train. And to Timmy it seemed that something very big was going to happen soon. He was bang on the money. Sometime after Timmy had found himself at Santa's secret toy shop, working busily alongside hundreds of other little kids, Santa had unveiled the secret. But it was at that very moment that Timmy had wakened up, a smile on his face and a resolution in his heart and in his mind. Timmy and the Stranger. Timmy was hospitalized in early October, and now the battle had begun to find him a liver donor. The doctors knew that they were racing against time, but as they would later say, their little patient was a real trooper and had never given up. As a matter of fact, it was he who had given strength and courage to his medical team. Eric had flown in the best team that money could buy, and everyone was there for the same reason, to save a little boy with the face of an angel and a smile as bright as sunshine. A little boy with a heart of gold. Through it all, Timmy had never complained. Instead, he was always concerned for his dad and Pavel and Marina. His visitors had to be limited so as to protect him from infection. Each day, Timmy read dozens of emails and cards from well-wishers, and he always replied to each email and each card. And Eric, Pavel, and Marina would help him to respond. He also received tons of chocolates, candy, and toys. And each time he did, he would tell his dad to save them for Christmas, and then to donate them to the less fortunate kids in their area. By early November, a donor had still not been found, for Timmy, and the little boy had begun to show signs of deterioration. At first, Timmy had thought that it was his very own dad. But upon closer inspection, he had discovered that it was not. The stranger spoke softly and gently to the little boy, and soon the two were chatting amiably. They talked about Timmy's dream and his love for toys, and they talked about Timmy's love for helping the less fortunate, and they talked about Timmy's love for creating toys and games, and they talked about so many other things. Timmy loved to create toys that talked, moved, and created basic tasks. They talked about Timmy's dream in great detail. They talked for a long time, and then the stranger had slipped away just as the nurse was approaching with Timmy's medication, promising to return the next day. And he did indeed return. Funny, but he never told Timmy his name, and Timmy had never asked. And by the end of the third day, Timmy and the stranger had made a pact and a plan. Timmy would not tell anyone about the stranger, the pact and the plan. In retrospect, it was a simple arrangement that had been struck between Timmy and the stranger. The pact was that in exchange for Timmy's silence, the stranger had promised to fulfill Timmy's dream. And now they had to work on a plan to make it all come true before being discovered. The stranger was truly impressed by Timmy's desire, his bravery, and his commitment. And in turn, Timmy loved the stranger's wish to make his dream come true. What a little boy. The two were now fast friends, and each day for the next few weeks, the stranger came each day to see Timmy just after supper, when all was quiet on Timmy's ward, and when no one would really be paying attention. The stranger was very mindful that Timmy was growing weaker by the day, and he also knew that he had to work very fast. And so, by the end of the third week of November, all was ready for the big trip. Despite his weakening state, the little boy, with the angelic face and the smile as bright as sunshine, could not be contained. And he had to do everything so as not to spill the beans to his dad and Pavel and Marina. Everyone around Timmy's case had certainly noticed the little boy's excitement. No one could figure out why. As a matter of fact, it had begun to make everyone wonder, because everyone knew that surely Timmy knew how very sick he was. Yet he seemed to be so very excited. His dad Eric had explained everything to him, and the little boy had asked the right questions. Eric had tried in vain to pick Timmy's brain, but Timmy was just that one step ahead of the game. There was one person, however, who knew what was going on, but he too was in on the game. And at the end of the day, there were only 3 people who really knew: Timmy, his new friend, and Dr. Yannick Stoller. He was Timmy's head doctor and Eric's very close friend. Just before the big day, the stranger had told Timmy his real name, and he had unveiled his identity. And the little boy was truly in awe. He swore Timmy to secrecy, telling him that Dr. Yannick Stover was the only other person who really knew everything. December the 6th, which was Timmy's 7th birthday, was one that the little boy would forever remember. It started with Eric, Pavel, and Marina coming to visit. A small birthday party had been planned for that day, and a few of Timmy's friends had also come to the hospital to visit. The party had been kept short and sweet because of his deteriorating health, and lots of birthday cards and gifts had adorned his room. And on that day, the media had also remembered. Someone had made very sure of this, and the local newspapers had front page stories about Timmy. One or two international magazines had also run some brief updates on Timmy's deteriorating health, and someone had read it all with great interest. Evening had come, and supper hour had just ended. Timmy was waiting anxiously, all propped up in bed, bound and determined to stay awake, despite his weakness. Determined to stay awake for the next 2 hours, and he did not have to wait for too very long. Dr. Stover had come in and examined the little boy, administering some medication to him, and shortly after he had left, his friend had tiptoed in softly. Timmy was ready. Timmy's special trip. The stranger had lifted Timmy gently onto his shoulders and had walked quickly out of the room. Dr. Stover was waiting outside in the hall, and the two men had walked down the hall and out of the hospital. Timmy had been dressed for the occasion. He was wearing a thick, warm snowsuit, and whooped when he saw the snowflakes coming down in huge clusters. He clapped his hands and had begun to laugh, as he had always enjoyed playing in the snow. And this was his first time outside of the hospital since he had been brought here in early October. Dr. Stover had to steady the little boy on the stranger's shoulders, and the little group of 3 walked swiftly towards a parked car, and Timmy had been placed in the back seat. Dr. Stover had got in beside the stranger, and soon they were on their way. They had not had to drive very far. Before Timmy knew it, they were entering a huge room, so similar to the one that Timmy had dreamed about not too long ago. But the difference here was that there were no other little boys and girls around. No one else but Timmy, his friend, and Dr. Yannick Stover. Timmy could not believe his eyes. Everything had been exactly as his friend had said it would be. Miles and miles of toys for as far as his eyes could see. His bright blue eyes lit up, all neatly arranged and all ready to be packaged and distributed. There were dolls and teddy bears that walked and talked. train sets that started and stopped through voice commands, racing cars that moved when spoken to, robots that picked up objects and brought them to you, many doll houses with dolls that spoke to each other, and furniture that could be moved around through voice commands, cities built on tiny tables that came to life at the touch of a button, and action figures and objects that could be moved around through the touch of buttons or through spoken commands. Wow. Games with large consoles, games that omitted voice output, and on it went. Timmy could not believe his eyes, and with the help of Dr. Stover and his friend, he went from toy to toy, trying each of them out, and simply whooping with excitement. Timmy loved it all, and he only had to look into his eyes to see how delighted he was, and how grateful he was to his friend for having kept to his part of the pact. Dr. Stover had kept a close eye on the little boy to make sure that he would not tire out himself. And when he saw that Timmy was beginning to fade, he told him that it was time to go. At first, Timmy had begun to cry and had begged the two men to let him stay a bit longer. But tiredness had then taken over, and Dr. Stover had had no difficulty lifting Timmy into his arms and taking him away. The stranger had then tidied up and locked the room, and then the two men had returned to the car. They had taken sleeping Timmy back to the hospital and had put him back into his bed. And it was only after they had done so that they had broken the silence. Dr. Stover and Timmy's stranger friend were extremely happy. The two men had embraced in the doctor's office, smiling broadly and giving high fives to each other. Then an off-duty Dr. Stover had brought out a bottle of bubbly from a small fridge in his office. Timmy prepares. That night, Timmy had dreamed about his journey to the secret toy shop. And when he had woken the next morning, the bedside nurse would later say that he had worn one of the broadest smiles that she had ever seen. And when she had asked him why he was so happy, the little boy had simply shook his head and had continued to smile. Eric, Pavel, and Marina had come to visit that day and had also noticed Timmy's disposition. But the little boy was not giving anything away. He had bigger things on his mind, and in addition, he knew that his time was fast approaching. He had to prepare himself for what was coming up. He had to be strong for Eric, Pavel, and Marina. Timmy was far wise beyond his years, and he knew that if a donor was not found for him in the next week, he would surely die. But the little boy's faith was very strong, and each day he prayed to God as he had been taught by his dad, Pavel, and Marina. But, as always, fate had the last say. Surprises are all around for everyone, and someone working behind the scenes. The media had started their own campaign on behalf of Timmy, thanks to Eric helping them on and egging them on. And with Christmas fast approaching, everyone had seemed to intensify their efforts. Christmas Eve was here, and Timmy had begged his dad to take him on their traditional Christmas trip around the city to hand out gifts to the less fortunate. But Eric had steadfastly refused, and Dr. Stover had had to remind Timmy how sick he was. He had to tell Timmy that he was not strong enough to go out with his dad, and that he needed to rest. But this had only made the little boy more upset. Timmy had begun to cry, and it had absolutely broken everyone's heart to see him do so. The little boy had taken a turn for the worst, and Dr. Stover had had to take action. It was the first time since his ordeal had started that Timmy had broken down like this. Eric had not wanted to leave his little boy like this, but Dr. Stover had somehow convinced him to go home for a while, telling him that if Timmy had taken a turn for the worst, he would call him immediately. As soon as Eric had departed, Dr. Stover had gone to work. He had walked or rushed to his office, and against the background noise of blaring Christmas carols over the intercom, he had made his Hail Mary call. Dr. Stover, who had not been a very religious man, had begun to pray. As the phone had rung once, twice, and then a third time before being picked up, an out-of-breath voice had picked up on the third ring, and had huskily whispered, "I'm almost there." And the drained Dr. Stover had put down the phone and had begun to weep uncontrollably. He had to prepare. Christmas Eve at the hospital was always special for the terminally ill. Very special for the terminally sick patients. And this one was no different. The staff had done their best to make things as festive as possible. And for Timmy, they had gone out of their way, filling his room with lots of fancy decorations, and stacking lots of gifts from well-wishers around his room. A very sick little boy had smiled feebly as the night nurse had come in to check on him, and he had seemed to perk up a bit when his friend had come in to sit by his bedside. His friend knew that Timmy was sinking fast, but there was something that he knew that Timmy would find out in a few hours. Timmy's Christmas morning. Eric, Pavel, and Marina had risen early and had gone to Mass, but none of them had really been able to concentrate much, because they were all very concerned about little Timmy. Would Eric's precious little boy live to see one more Christmas? And as Mass was coming to an end, Eric's cell phone had begun to vibrate, and Eric had rushed out of the church to answer it. Pavel and Marina were fast on his heels, and Eric had driven at breakneck speed to the hospital, and he had failed to notice a stranger who had fallen in behind him and Pavel and Marina as they had raced to Timmy's room. Then Eric had pushed open the door and had gasped. Timmy's bed was empty, but a young orderly, dressed all in white, from head to toe, was waiting, and he was smiling. Eric would later remember that the orderly had looked just like an angel, because he was wearing a hat with golden tassels on his head. The orderly had told Eric that Timmy was in surgery at that very moment, because Dr. Stover had just received a liver for his little boy. Eric was beside himself, and Pavel and Marina had begun to cry. Hours later, a very tired but smiling Stover had come in to see Eric and had delivered the good news. Timmy's surgery had gone very well, but the next few hours would be very critical. Dr. Stover was very optimistic. But there was something else for Eric that fateful day. After delivering the good news, the doctor had told Eric to step out of the room with him, and not even Eric was prepared for what happened next. Waiting anxiously for Eric outside of Timmy's room was his long-lost dad. The stranger who had befriended Timmy several weeks ago, and the one who had made Timmy's dream come true. Eric could not believe his eyes, and after a moment he had rushed into his dad's open arms. And the two men had embraced and had clung to each other for several minutes before anyone had spoken. Timmy had known that his stranger friend was Eric's dad, but this was the pact that he had made with him. Sasha Frykowski and Timmy had made this pact several weeks ago. Eric's dad, Sasha, would grant Timmy his dream, and in return, Timmy would keep his identity a secret. And Dr. Stover had been in on all of this. Timmy would live to tell his side of the story, and Eric's dad would tell his story to his son. That fateful Sunday, so many years ago, when the men had come and had seized Eric's parents, the men were in fact Western agents and had taken Eric's parents away to a safe place. But Eric's dad had always kept an eye on his eldest son from afar. And unknown to Eric, it was Western agents who had helped Eric to get to America. Sasha Frykowski had watched as his son had flourished. But his superiors had forbidden him from contacting his son until now. Eric's mom was still alive and waiting at home to greet Eric and his family. But his two younger brothers were still in Europe with their families. And months later, the entire family would be reunited. And Timmy would live to enjoy everything around him. New grandparents and new uncles with their families. All had ended well. I'm Detective DJ, and I hope you enjoyed listening to this Christmas episode, Santa's Secret Toy Shop. I wish you all a very, very Merry Christmas, and I invite you to tune in for day 4 of my special Christmas episodes. Day 4 of my Christmas box set, The 12 Days of Christmas. Happy holidays to everyone, and Merry Christmas to you. Bye for now.